In the air to right field. Way back there. Fair or foul.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 5 of Fair or Foul here on WTBU Sports. I'm Daniel Maltz.
Jacob Littner.
And we are honored to bring back our director from one of our co-directors from last year, Matt Doherty. Welcome back to the show.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for having me. It feels so weird walking through this building right now. It's my first time back on. I've been on campus, but first time in a building. I'm walking up the stairs like this doesn't feel right. But then I saw you two beautiful faces, and I'm ready to go. And thank you for having me, guys. It's good to be back.
It is an honor to have you. So Ben Silver, our usual third musketeer, a little bit busy this week, and so we had to call in a friend from
phone in a friend
to join us here for episode 5. And so I think what everybody's really talking about in the baseball world is the World Series starts tomorrow. The Houston Astros, 107 wins in the regular season, franchise record, blah blah blah. They beat the Yankees, taking on the underdogs of this season, the Washington Nationals. I'm so excited for this World Series. It's regardless of whether or not, either team's offense is really on point, this is going to be baseball's two best starting rotations facing each other.
Yeah, and it's the two best starting rotations who are also pitching incredibly well right now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, of course, we all saw what the Nationals did to the Cardinals in 4 games. They had no hit through 6 2/3 in both the first and the second game. And
I think so.
Something like that. Then the Astros, when you've got Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, and Zach Greinke, you could toss those 3 guys out in any order, and you're going to be pretty much fine.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted the Dodgers. I like the Dodgers, so I wanted the Dodgers to be in this matchup against either the Yankees or the Astros. But out of all the rest, sorry to your Cardinals, I'd definitely rather see the Nationals as a fan in this. And
that happens.
You're right. It is an exciting matchup because Washington is playing so well. I think Houston's still, the juggernaut, but Washington is playing so well. When you get hot, things happen. And, I mean, the first 3 games are just amazing pitching matchups, and every game's going to be really close. And I think, obviously the edge will go to Houston in most categories, but when you have Strasburg, Scherzer, and Corbin trotting out for your 3 starters, you have a chance to win every game, and it's going to be very interesting to see what's going to happen. It is. Now that I kind of think about it, it is going to be a really good matchup. I'm excited for this.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at, we talked about the pitching staffs. It worked out so perfectly for Houston that the championship series ended up going to 6 games instead of 7, because if it went to 7, then Garrett Cole would have had to pitch yesterday in Game 7, and then he'd be, whether or not first of all, if the Yankees had managed to get this series to 7 games, I would be jumping for joy, because they looked so down and out of it after Game 4 when they lost 8-3 and committed 4 errors. The team looked absolutely horrible. And I mean, we'll talk about the 2 championship series teams that lost these series for a large portion here this episode, but the Yankees managed to win Game 5. They got 4 runs off Justin Verlander, and it didn't really matter that they didn't touch him after that. They didn't touch the Astros after that, because James Paxton had the best, most important start of his professional career. But then you go back to Game 6, and it was back and forth. I mean, one pitch from Chad Green. It wasn't even a bad pitch. With the 3-run home run that Gurriel hit, it was in off the plate, but Yuli was waiting for it, and he pounced all over it. And it took the Yankees, I think, until 2 outs or 1 out in the top of the 9th to tie it. I thought going into that top of the 9th against Osuna, I thought they were done. I mean, the Astros had they turned 2 fantastic double plays in the 7th and 8th innings. I mean, just defensive 5-star plays. The Yankees might as well have just thrown in the towel there, but they didn't. I mean, Gio Urshela figured out how to hit the ball again, and DJ LeMay, he was the team MVP all season, and he got tied back up. And then, we know what happened after that.
Well, how about that swing of emotion, right? You think,
Yeah.
I mean, down to your final 2 outs, you hit the home run to tie, and you're feeling like $1 million, right? Moltz, I couldn't even imagine you watching that game. You're probably jumping around. You think that this is the moment of the series, and then you have Chapman on the mound. All right, we can get this to extra innings without a doubt. You had 2 outs in the inning too. right? In that
Yep.
bottom of the ninth, and then the whole. I mean, that's just a crazy swing of emotions, especially when you have a guy like Chapman on the mound who never gives up homer, never gives up runs in general, and then one pitch, all of a sudden you think you're forcing a Game 7 where anything can happen, and that's a crushing loss. But you have to give the Yankees credit. I mean, I thought that they were done after when they were down 3-1. I was impressed that they even won that fifth game at Yankee Stadium, and then to come back and really put up a good fight against Game 6. You can't really hang your head if the Astros were the better team all season long, and you push them to 6 games. Here's the thing you got to get a starter. I don't think that this method that they thought they could get away with, it doesn't work. 3 straight years you haven't made the World Series for the Yankees. You got to get a starter.
Well, actually, not just 3 straight years, but apparently I saw
This is the first decade since the
They haven't won a World Series. Wow.
First decade since that they haven't even made it to a World Series.
Wow.
Since the 1910s.
It's
It's been 100 years since the last decade where the Yankees didn't make a World Series. Now, of course, it fluctuated with each decade. You had decades like the 20s, 40s, and 50s where they were in every other World Series. And then you also had decades like the 1960s where they were in 2, and they lost one of them. And then in the 1980s where they only made it once, but they at least made it to a World Series in each of those decades. And that sucks, but I mean that's not what I'm really feeling so crushed over.
You're not really allowed to be upset the Yankees just aren't in the World Series.
No, I'm not over. No, believe me, I'm not overly upset about the fact that that decade is over and the Yankees are not in the World Series. But you're absolutely right, Matt. I mean the Yankees kind of had the same plan going into this postseason that the Milwaukee Brewers had going into last postseason, and it ended the same way for both teams, where both teams became so reliant on their bullpens, and for the second straight year, they've been the case studies of how that doesn't work. As good as the Yankees relievers were, especially, I think the case in point with this one is Zach Britton. Zach Britton, I think he must have pitched in 5 of the 6 games. The only game he probably didn't pitch in was the 8-3 loss, which was Game 4. He probably pitched in every other game. And when you're facing the same left-handed, when the same hitters are facing the same reliever 5 times in a week, you're either A, the reliever's going to have a bad outing eventually, and he did in Game 6. He got out of it a big jam, but he gave up a hit and 2 walks. Or, fortunately, this didn't happen, but it could have. They were going to start hitting him. It's an unsustainable system when you're going to be running out, when you have Green, Canely, and Britton pitching in every game. They're not that difficult to figure out. I mean, obviously, these are professional pitchers who have wicked stuff. They're not easy to hit, but if you see them enough times and frequently enough, you can get them. And each one of those big 3 guys had their moments. It was tough.
Yeah. But Britton had himself a fantastic postseason. He pitched in 7 games overall, 8 total innings, gave up just 2 hits in those 8 innings. That's with the 6 walks, it's a 1 even whip, but a .08 average with just 1 earned run off that homer. I mean, that's impeccable for Zach Britton. He was able to get lefties and righties out. Tommy Canely too had himself a postseason too. He had 8 innings pitched as well. He gave up 2 earned runs, but struck out 8 and had a .138 average against him. I mean, for the Yankees bullpen, they're pitching well. It's just you can't expect the same 4 guys to cover up 9 innings day in and day out.
Yeah, and one last thing on those guys is that, those numbers are impeccable, as you said, but you can't expect them to pitch to those numbers when they are pitching more days in a row than they've ever had to pitch, and when they're facing the same hitters more times in a row than they've ever had to before.
Yeah, I mean, you can't you can't rely on that. But the thing that's intriguing about this World Series is there was that bullpen thought over the last couple of years where you got to have 4 or 5 relievers, right? The Royals did it, and that's what helped them win a World Series. And then teams started following that blueprint, and those teams that have fallen short. And this World Series is a great example of that, where the 2 teams with the 2 best starting pitching staffs in the major leagues made the World Series, which I think now you're going to start to get a shift back to the traditional way where, all right, we do need to build from our starters up. Now, the one thing I will say with the Yankees is Betances not being in that bullpen for the postseason is a huge blow, because that changes a lot of what you're trying to do. Where if you add that other arm where you can get, maybe 5-6 outs from him instead of Chad Green maybe only takes the day off or only pitches a third of an inning or something like that, and you can piece it together a little bit differently, that would obviously help. But I think that these Nationals and the Astros prove that starting pitching is still valuable. So maybe we'll start to see that in the coming years, where teams don't value those relievers as much. You obviously need a strong bullpen, but you can't do that without strong starters, and getting length from your starters, something the Yankees didn't have in this series.
Yeah, I mean, the Nationals, we've talked about on this podcast, and it's been widely broadcast, that the Nationals bullpen's bad.
Oh, it sucks.
It's just,
but not in the playoffs.
Not in the playoffs, but
Which
they
is
have
really
two relievers. One and a quarter, maybe, relievers between Daniel Hudson and Sean Doolittle. Outside of that, I don't really trust anybody else to pitch in a World Series.
And Daniel Hudson's been a bad pitcher for 5 years now.
Well,
and I know he's having a good year this year, but
yeah.
I mean, he's not something. You throw him out in Game 6 in Houston in a 3-3 game in the 8th, I think he's going to give up a home run. I'm not confident with Daniel Hudson on the mound in that situation.
No, I'm not confident in him either, or the fossil Fernando Rodney coming in out of that pen. But for the Nationals, what's so interesting is that they've got the 4 great starting pitchers. They have Doolittle and Hudson, but they have another young reliever who has he had a bad regular season, but so far in this postseason he has jumped up the bullpen depth charts. He's a hard-throwing right-hander named Tanner Rainey. He's somebody you've probably never heard of and you've probably never seen pitch, but he's got a triple-digit fastball and one of the toughest sliders to hit, at least in these playoffs. I think I saw some article about the championship series, how few Nationals relievers pitched, period, in this series.
Yeah.
They were just running through the names of guys that didn't pitch. And obviously we know Doolittle and Hudson. And then they talk about this kid, Rainey. He's like 26 with a cannon for an arm on the mound. I think if you're the Nationals, we're talking bullpens, I think any hot bullpen arm, any extra guy who can pitch well, even for 4 games or for a week, one more week, they got to take it and run.
Yeah. And
I love your point, Matt, that this hopefully will be a shift back towards really focusing on starting pitching, but I have to disagree with that, just because that's these two teams are beyond blessed to have rotations like these. But we are seeing so many more teams shying away from starting pitchers who know how to work out and take care of their bodies the right way, where they can maximize performance without going over the top and hurting themselves. There's so few guys anymore who make more than 30 starts or throw 200 innings or will throw 100-plus pitches every single time they take the mound. There's so few of those guys left. And in this World Series, we are going to see 6 of them. We are going to see 6. I can't think of how many more guys beyond these 6 that are out there that you can really, really trust. I mean, probably the Dodgers guys too. But outside of those 3 teams, there's a handful of other guys. And I think we should be so lucky that we are going to see, at least hopefully for the first 3 games of this series, that these are going to be 3 marquee pitching performances.
Yeah,
you have what is it? It's Cole and Scherzer in Game 1.
Cole Scherzer,
and then Strasburg, Verlander, and then Corbin Greinke.
Pretty good.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's
the
not
fact
bad.
that those 2 trios are trios of teammates that are going to face off against each other in the World Series. I don't know what to expect. This is going to be I think for the Nationals, I'm rooting for them in this World Series, and I have a couple of reasons for that.
Ugh.
A, I don't want the Astros to win, just because still salty. But I also, Washington hasn't won a World Series yet. This is their first World Series appearance, period. There's only one team left in Major League Baseball that's never appeared in a World Series. Do either of you guys know who it is?
Those poor Seattle Mariners.
Yeah.
Wait, who'd you say?
Seattle.
It's the Seattle Mariners.
They're the only team that hasn't
They've
appeared?
never made a World Series.
They're the best team in baseball, and they
Multiple times.
Multiple times.
I mean, they still own the regular season record for wins, and of course they got eliminated in the division series, and that essentially happened to the Dodgers this year, where best record in the National League, and
there was a franchise record for wins to them too.
I think yeah.
Yeah.
And they got beat. But anyway, this is going to be a really big test for the Nationals because Scherzer, Strasburg, and Corbin, they live on strikeouts and getting swings and misses with their filthy stuff. But they're going to be facing the lineup that is the most difficult to strike out. And when those two concepts are going to clash with each other in this World Series, it's going to be a really interesting challenge.
Yeah, I think the big thing, though, for the Nationals that kind of sticks in their favor, though, is we knew that they were already a good defensive team, but we saw in the NLCS against the Cardinals, any ball in play is playable for those players. I mean, once you get rid of Bryce Harper in right field, that's a huge defensive improvement no matter who you put out there because they're actually going to.
And he's been replaced by a Gold Glover and Adam Eaton.
Yeah, they're good because Adam Eaton cares about playing defense. Juan Soto, who knew he was going to be so good in left field,
he's been really solid.
And then right there at their corners, Ryan Zimmerman used to be one of the best defensive third basemen in the league. He's not as mobile anymore now, but he's still a solid defensive option at first base. Then that corner, the other corner with Anthony Rendon, he made some flashing plays in the NLCS. I'm not worried about them at all. It's just for the Nationals pitchers, just being able to keep the ball in the ballpark.
Oh yeah, that's so tough in Houston. I mean, case in point, Altuve's walk-off home run that sent them to the World Series. You know, I'm not gonna try to make excuses for Chapman. He threw him a slider. It was on the outside corner where he wanted it. It was way too high. It wasn't a good pitch. But Altuve, he's not a big guy, and he stands at the edge of the batter's box, pretty much about as far away as you can most of the time, and somehow, some way, he squared that ball up.
Yeah.
And even if it was him reaching out or whatever, the ball flies out of Houston way more than you would think it does.
Yeah,
more than Yankee Stadium, believe it or not. Yankee Stadium was not a hugely hitter-friendly ballpark this year. Houston was way more.
Well, that LeMahieu home run is kind of a fly out to right, and it looked like that off the bat, and especially in other parks, that's just a normal fly ball that the right fielder camps under.
Yeah.
So you're right, yeah. But I think this series is really going to come down to if this Houston lineup can make these national pitchers work, not strike out that much, string together, some home runs, especially off Scherzer, who's a little home run prone, and then get those starters out of the game by the sixth, at worst, seventh inning in a manageable spot, and then you get to go against that bullpen, put them in high leverage situations. I can't see the Nationals winning this series. I think Houston has the better rotation. I think Houston has the better bullpen. And I think Houston has the better lineup. So unless you get 8 shutout innings or 8 innings of one-run ball from Scherzer and Strasburg in games 1 and 2, and they steal one of those games, I really do find it hard to see the Nationals winning this series.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's no doubt about it that this is going to be an uphill climb for Washington. They are not the favorites to win this series by any means. They weren't even supposed to make the World Series. They were not expected to get through the Dodgers, and I mean, I guess people at the same time figured that the Cardinals weren't going to get past the Braves, and that happened. The NLCS turned out to be the matchup of probably the two teams that you would have least expected to be there. Because or maybe you could argue with,
especially early in the season.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Listen, I firmly believe that Dave Martinez, whose job was on the line, he was on the brink of getting fired at the end of May when the Nats were 19-31, 12 games under. And with the way that team completely rallied back the rest of the way, I think he's going to win NL Manager of the Year.
I think he should, yeah.
There's nobody else who should.
I'd say Mike Schild. I mean, just being a homer here, but Mike Schild's the only other guy who's close because the Cardinals were a game below 500 the day before the All-Star break, and then pop up and now won the NL Central, got to the NLCS, and then disappointed the way the season ended. But I mean, another good coaching job in the second half by Mike Schild. I think that's kind of becoming his calling card.
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, there have been a lot of managers in this postseason who have had the world thrown at them in this season, and they've come through. You look at Washington and Dave Martinez and what he's done with that team. And not to play a homer myself here, but I also think if we're going to talk about managers of the year for a quick second here, that Aaron Boone is going to win the AL Manager of the Year award.
Oh, definitely.
Simply because
or Kevin Cash.
I mean, those two guys are excellent candidates, and I think those are the two finalists, in my opinion. But the reason I think Boone deserves to win it over Cash did what he did with his team, famously microscopic payroll. But Aaron Boone had to deal with 39 separate IL stints by his players this year. 39 by 30 different players.
There's a period of time where every guy on the Yankees opening day started. All the opening day starting lineup was out, right? Something like that. I think 7 or 8.
No, it was. I think it was half their opening day lineup was on the injured list, more than half, because I think there was a point in the season where Judge was hurt, Stanton was hurt, Hicks was hurt, and Duhar was long gone. Tulowitzki was long gone, and I think Gary Sanchez.
I think Sanchez was in there too.
Exactly.
And
so I think
Gregorius was out.
And Gregorius. So maybe
like 7 guys. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and because DJ LeMahieu, for whatever reason, was not in the Yankees opening day lineup, so he wasn't even going to be a factor in that. And then probably on a day where Gleyber Torres had a day off, there may have been a day. You're probably right.
Yeah,
there may have been a day where the entire opening day lineup was either having a day off or injured, and this team still won 103 games. They had to persevere through so much. I was happy when they made it to the championship series, but you know, I like to be a realistic baseball fan. As much as I love the Yankees, you have to be realistic. Houston outplayed them. Yeah. They did. You know, the Yankees got off to a great start winning Game 1 in Houston. That was something that they didn't do in 2017. They lost all 4 games in Houston. But then, you know, the tough loss, Carlos Correa with the home run off Verlander.
That's the series, right? I mean, you steal that game, and I think the Yankees win this. They were leading.
They were leading
in the 7th or
2-1 in the 6th, I want to say, and then
tied from that way out. But I mean, that I think that's the turning point of the series. That game right there. I mean, if the Yankees somehow stealed Game 2 in Houston, I think they're in the World Series right now.
Without a doubt.
Those extra innings, what would it go to 11?
Yeah,
that's the that's the series right. Those couple innings were just so huge, and that's the thing. You didn't get the length from the start of that game, right? They pulled Paxton really early. You get to the bullpen, all of a sudden you have J.A. Happ out there for the 10th and 11th innings, and
because you had to. The only other guys that they had left, I think the only guys who were left in the bullpen after that were Luis Sessa and Tyler Lyons, your 2 least trustworthy relievers. Now to give Luis Sessa some credit, he pitched 2 perfect innings in Game 6, probably the 2 best innings of relief he's had in his entire professional career. But yeah, I mean that's what you get from, you know, trying to milk every ounce of baseball out of your bullpen so early on in that series. Now, for the most part, up until the Correa home run, with the one exception, with the one mistake of having Ottavino pitch to Springer, Boone did a very good job managing his bullpen in that game.
No, he did.
Of course.
Yeah. It wasn't his fault. It's just what happens when.
Well, I mean, with that game, you do have to ask yourself the question of Chad Green. This was Game 2. It was still early on. The Astros hitters were not used to seeing him that much yet, and he had just retired 6 batters in a row. And George Springer was coming up, and they bring in Ottavino. He's got the wicked slider, but George Springer was one of the best breaking ball hitters in baseball. He hit 330 in low 3s against breaking balls this year. And of course, the very first pitch that Ottavino throws to Springer is a hanging slider, same spot of the plate where Altuve hit his home run. And, you know, these Astros, they know how to pull the ball anywhere in that park, and they paid for it. And yeah. I think that was in the 5th inning. It was in the 5th inning where Springer tied it up, and it stayed tied from that point on. But I agree with you, Matt. I think that Game 2 completely changed the motion of this series because of what we were talking about. The Yankees won Game 1, which is something that I don't think Houston was expecting to do.
I don't think most people expected them to do, no.
Exactly. Even if it's, you know, Greinke doesn't pitch well against the Yankees, but it was Greinke in Houston with the Astros hitters in their home ballpark. Houston went 61-20 at Minute Maid Ballpark this year. It was their best record ever at home. So who would have thunk the Yankees would pull one win in Houston out of those 4? And they won Game 1. They've got everything going their way. They've got Paxton. He wasn't super efficient, but he had great stuff against the Twins. You figure that if he's on when he's got, you know, great fastball, cutter, good curveball, he's going to have everything going. And he lasts 2 1/3 innings. And then,
to be fair,
he wasn't pitching well in that game. I'm not going to try to say he was.
Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, 2 1/3 innings. Of course, you've got that great bullpen, but I think you'd like to get Paxton stretched out a little bit more. I mean,
No, definitely.
I get he wasn't pitching super well, but he hadn't given up that much. He would given up
One
it
run.
was just
He
one
had
run,
given
right?
up. He had given up one run,
And then
but
a couple base
it was,
runners.
Yeah, so I think he was either first and third or second and third with one out in the third, and Boone decided because
Just yanked him.
because the next guy up was Bregman, and I will give the Yankees credit for a couple of things with how they with the series as a whole. There were a few hitters on that team who you expected to have monster series, monster postseasons, and the Yankees completely neutralized them. Namely, Alex Bregman didn't have an RBI in this series until Game 6, and he had a couple of hits sprayed out here and there, but considering that he was the MVP of your team for that season and everything that he did right in this regular season, the Yankees essentially shut him down, and they fully shut down Yordan Alvarez, who was, 21-year-old rookie outfielder, came up out of nowhere, and essentially from the day he made his major league debut, he didn't stop hitting. The league just could not figure out how to stop him.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, I think he went 1 for 21 or 2 for 21.
Went 1 for 22 with 12 strikeouts.
Yeah, he had an awful, awful championship series. Now, of course, Correa, they couldn't keep down the three guys who have really three of the four core pieces. You have Bregman, who they were able to keep quiet, but then you have Springer, Altuve, and Correa, and they couldn't keep any of those guys quiet.
So how does Washington win this series?
How does Washington win this series? I mean, I think you guys talked about it. Houston's goal would really be to knock these starters out after 5 or 6 innings and get into that bullpen. And for Washington, I think it's just you have to trust the process. You've got a really deep, durable starting rotation, and Dave Martinez is going to have to do the opposite of what Aaron Boone did for the Yankees, which was you've got to let your starters throw 110 pitches, maybe even more, in each of their games. You need to get every last quality pitch out of them that you can. And I think one of the things that makes all three of these guys really, really good, especially Strasburg, Scherzer, and Anibal Sanchez, is they don't walk guys. They're going to pitch in the strike zone, and if you can locate in the strike zone and keep the batter's timing and balance off, you're going to get them out. I think Washington's got a solid lineup comprised of both star caliber hitters and hot hitters.
Yeah.
And they've got a really scary rotation. No doubt about it. My big concern for the Nationals is that we're going to see them in the same situation that the Detroit Tigers were in 06 and in 12, which was that they had a week off from the championship series to the World Series. In 06 the Tigers swept the A's before losing to the 83-win Miracle Cardinals in 2006.
Heck yeah.
Then in 2012, they swept the Yankees and then got swept by a San Francisco Giants team that had to overcome so much on their end in that postseason. And now the Nationals are in the same boat too. And it's a tough situation to be in because you're already not the favorite. And you're now in a really difficult position. You've got a lot of, I don't want to say rust, because Dave Martinez said in press conferences after the series ended that his team needed a break. They needed a couple of days off. So this could be really good for them. But recent cases of this will tell you that it's a really bad thing.
I don't know. I mean, just for another little piece of history, those 2012 Giants, they came back from that 3-1 deficit and beat the Cardinals there in 7 games. And I think another big victory in the LCS over the Cardinals, that bodes pretty well for the Nationals at least. But when you've got these 4 guys in your starting rotation, you've got, Scherzer, Strasburg, and Corbin, we know those are all-star caliber guys every year. And Anibal Sanchez is just a monster in the postseason.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he's had a bad postseason start yet. At least not this year.
No, certainly not, especially when you consider that, when he was on the Tigers in 12 and 13, he was throwing mid-90s, and he still has a pretty decent repertoire of pitches.
Yeah.
But he's barely throwing 90 miles an hour now, and we know that that's way below average these days, and he still gets the job done. He was Atlanta's most consistent starting pitcher last year, had a really solid year this year. To have that caliber of postseason capability as your number 4 starting pitcher,
insane. And
Is absolutely insane.
you just get whiplash going from, I mean, what we assume, we have Sanchez starts game 4, and then assuming there's a game 5, we got Max Scherzer. Going from the high 80s fastball Venable Sanchez to Max Scherzer, who just keeps getting better and faster as the game goes along. That's scary. That's scary to go up against no matter how good your lineup is.
And Houston's had some issues with their fourth starter. Like they did a bullpen game.
Yeah, they did
when they had that spot up. So that's a thing where if you're Washington, if you can take one in Houston, where I think game 1 it's going to be tough going against Cole. I think Houston kind of has to win that game to get off on the right foot. But Verlander hasn't been dominant as we've seen. He had the bad start in Tampa Bay. He got 4 runs in game 1 against New York. So Verlander can be beat, and this is a Washington lineup that I think can do that. And then you go back home. If you're tied 1-1, you get Greinke in game 3, who I still don't trust Zach Greinke in a big spot to go 7 shutout innings.
Especially on the
He's
road.
definitely beatable.
Yeah.
And then game 4, you have the starting pitching advantage when you have Sanchez, a veteran who's been there against a bullpen game. So that's the path for Washington. You got to win 1 in Houston, I think. And then you're back home with that crowd, and you can maybe, beat Greinke. Then you got a little matchup in game 4. If it's not 2-2 after, if it's not 2-2 after 4, they're done. They're done. Because then you get Cole game 5, then you go back to Houston, you're toast. So you got to take one in Houston in either 1 or 2, and then those 3 and 4 games are going to swing the series, really.
Yeah, I think you look at I'm a little bit I would maybe disagree with that, because I think that on the whole, I think Houston executed this bullpen game in game 6 against the Yankees perfectly. I really think they did. The pitching staff was not perfect in that game. I'm talking about before Osuna. Through the first 8 innings, they gave up 2 runs. But when you got 2 runs with a lineup like Houston's, you can trust them. And I think the guy who really had a breakout performance in that bullpen game was the rookie right-hander Jose Urquidy. He pitched 2 1/3 innings of relief and struck out 5 straight Yankees at the middle of his outing. I mean, he's got some nasty stuff. I mean, he's got a mid-90s fastball, a really tight slider, and a really, really good changeup. I mean, his changeup had the Yankees hitters corkscrewing themselves into the ground while he was on the mound. So I think Washington can definitely win game. I think they can win game 2 against Houston. I think Justin Verlander is beatable this postseason. He hasn't been the normal Houston Astros Justin Verlander in any of his 3 starts. He got knocked out real quick against Tampa Bay. In game 2 against the Yankees, he really had to labor through 6 2/3 innings of 2-run ball. And he's a little bit lucky that he didn't give up more runs, because some of these Yankees hitters from games 2 through 4, they just could not put bat on ball. They couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat. Okay? So Verlander had to labor through game 2 to get a win. And then obviously in game 5, he was able to, gather himself and end up going 7 innings with 9 strikeouts.
Which was huge for them.
Huge for them. Huge for that set up there. It gave them the chance to really go for that bullpen game in game 6, but he gave up 4 runs in the first inning. And we know that with Washington, if Washington starting pitching can do what James Paxton did in that game 5, shut Houston's lineup down while Washington gets to Verlander, with both of these guys, and maybe even less so with Greinke, with Cole and Verlander, they're going to have 1 bad inning in all their outings. Something I've noticed with them, and every time the Yankees faced Chris Sale, it was when he was in his prime in 17 and 18.
Still in his prime. Relax over there.
All right. So, but with all 3 of those guys, they have 1 inning where they're just a little off. Something's not right for 1 inning, and if you miss them in that inning, that's how you lose. The Yankees, when Gregorius hit the fly ball that fell 2 feet short of a home run off Garrett Cole, that was it. They weren't going to touch him after that, because Garrett Cole is just like Scherzer and Verlander. He gets so much better the more he works into a game. And on the other end, when the Yankees had to face Verlander, they got to him. His 1 bad inning turned out to be the first, and he gave up 4 runs. He settled down after that, but the damage was done. So I think Washington, for them to get by in this World Series, It's going to take their starting pitching performing as it needs to, long, strong outings, but also they're going to need to pounce on the one bad inning these starters are going to have.
Yeah, and if anything else bodes well for the Nationals in this series, it's that they're a team that can jump on pitchers early. I mean, you saw what they did in Game 7, or not Game 7, the Game 4 when they scored 7 in the first inning against the Cardinals, and then they scored 6 more in the first 5 innings in Game 3. The Nationals have a good, solid lineup. They know what the scouting report. Dave Martinez, as you've been saying, is a great manager. And, I mean, with Trey Turner, with Anthony Rendon, just the firepower at the top of that lineup, they're going to be able to get somebody on base. And then with the speed of Turner, with the speed of Eaton, they'll probably be able to put some runs across if one of those guys reaches. And so that's the one thing with the Nationals that I really do trust, regardless of who's starting on the mound for them. But it really does come down to you've got to win at least one game in Houston. I mean, because as Matt was saying, like you're not going to be able to win all 3 games at home, most likely.
Probably not.
You're not going to be able to rattle off 3 in a row. It's going to be hard to rattle off even 2 in a row against the Astros. But you're not going to be able to win 3 in a row, regardless of where those games are held. And so you got to get to them early. And with Garrett Cole, I mean, that's a bummer. That's a bummer that they're just going to lose Game 1.
Probably.
But
you have a chance. I mean,
you got a chance.
You're going to take Strasburg on the mound in Game 2. I mean, that's a pretty good scenario to go up against, and you'll see what happens. I mean, there's nothing really Washington can do. You're going to put out some good quality starting pitching, and Strasburg is a guy that you want him on the mound in that spot. He's a guy that can throw 8 shutout innings, and you can win that game too. And you hit a couple solo homers off Verlander, and all of a sudden you're back 1-1 going home, and those 3 games are the swing games. So there is a path. You know, I still do think Houston will win this series, but there is a path because you have that elite starting pitching. You're always going to have a chance, or at least be in the game for most of 6-7 innings.
Yeah, I mean, this series is just, it's so exciting because at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that we can say are pretty likely to happen, but we know that this is baseball and that anything can happen. The Astros are much more likely to win Game 1 with Garrett Cole on the mound, but it might not happen. Especially when you've got Scherzer on the mound, and this Nationals team looks so driven to go all the way with this. I mean, you just look at how their postseason has gone. They finally won a playoff series when they knocked off the Dodgers. Now they're 1 series away from going to the World Series, and they steamroll the Cardinals. I mean,
you didn't have to go that aggressive, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Just a little bit. I mean, listen, I know the Cardinals kind of had they tried their best to come back in Game 4, but they were pretty much dominated in that series.
Yeah.
Oh, they were
they
dead
ran
in
out
the
of
water
gas.
after Game 2. Yeah,
it happens. I mean, they reached their peak.
Absolutely,
It's safe to say that. And that's the thing. Does Houston have the advantage? They've been through a tougher road. Tampa Bay is a good team. They took them to 5 games. They've already been in that elimination game. And then New York is, I think, the second best team in this postseason. So they've definitely had a harder road. They've faced more quality pitchers. They've faced more quality teams. And that rest, like, is Washington a little rusty? I think the path matters in some cases when you get to a stage like this. And Houston has played the way tougher schedule up to date.
Without a doubt. I think Houston has had the way more difficult path to get here. But Washington being in this World Series, it's got to mean the world to both of these franchises to be in this World Series. But for Washington, it's so much more.
Oh yeah,
because I mean they are the underdog team of the 2019 season. You look at all the circumstances: 19-31 through 50 games, and somehow, some way, they come back from all that. They win 93 games. They knock off the NL's juggernaut heavyweight in the Dodgers. They breeze past St. Louis to the World Series.
Their revenge from 2012.
Absolutely beyond. I mean, I think they got their. I think they more than got their revenge.
And then some. Yeah.
So, Washington has certainly had an easier time getting here, but I think that means so much more to them, even more than Houston overcoming the Yankees and getting back to the World Series. These two teams are so driven by, the rush of competitiveness. There's so many aggressively competitive players on on both of these teams. I mean, you are going to see 100 million% laid on the line by both of these teams, without question.
I mean, the biggest piece here for the Nationals, it's not Scherzer's anger that he pitches with. It's not Dave Martinez being one of the most cerebral managers in the game. It's Ryan Zimmerman being the first ever draft pick by the Washington Nationals whenever they moved there in 2005. And for him to reach this stage, I think that's going to be all the motivation that any of these players need, just doing it for Zimmerman. I mean, bringing a World Series to Washington wouldn't be a bad idea. But I think it's right there is just the emotional drive that you've got there in Washington. And in Houston, they know they're the better team. They know that with veterans on the mound, you've got Justin Verlander and Garrett Cole. It doesn't matter who else you've got, even if it's not Zach Greinke. I mean, Greinke's a great pitcher and all, but in the postseason, he's been a little bit shaky. He's lost his last 2 starts. And so, I mean, not great numbers for Greinke this postseason. But you've got Verlander and Cole, and then the best lineup this season in baseball. That's pretty good motivation to get you guys a win.
Oh, absolutely. But I think while we can agree that Houston is the better team, they probably won't, but they cannot sleep on the Nationals. They can't go into the series and say, "Oh, we've got this in the bag."
I don't think
because
they
don't. I know. I'm saying they probably won't, but on the slight off chance that maybe they are feeling a little bit cocky because Houston probably thought that the Yankees were going to be their toughest opponent in this entire postseason, and you can make the case that that's true, and they beat them. So it didn't really matter for them who they were going to face in the World Series. Even if it was the Dodgers, they probably thought that if they beat the Yankees, they could beat anybody. But Washington is so white hot with this postseason and with all these factors that we've been talking about. This series is not going to be over quickly. I think this series is going to go a minimum of 5 games. There is no way with that 4-headed monster of Washington's rotation. There is no way that all 4 of those guys pitch in losses in the first 4 games. No chance.
It'll go back to Houston for Game 6, I would think, and I think I'd probably say Houston in 6 would be my prediction before here. Another thing that I want to mention, Houston expects to be here and win. I think Washington is happy to be here. Where this is kind of like reaching the World Series would be a big accomplishment for this team. Like they've kind of already done what they had to do, is how I look at it. Where Houston is like, if they lose, this is disappointing if they lose this World Series. They've built a team where they want to create a dynasty.
They built a super team.
Yeah. And Washington hasn't. Washington kind of found some flash in the pan, lightning in the bottle, and they've reached this point. And I just think that eventually runs out, especially when you face a team with the capability of the Astros. That's all I think.
That's fair. I mean, while we're throwing out predictions, I'm going to say Washington 7. That's mostly just because as much as getting swept in the NLCS hurts, I mean, I'm rooting for the Nationals in this one, just for the history, and because it's the idea of a super team that I just don't want the Astros to be good. They've made the ALCS 3 straight years to World Series 2 of the last 3 now.
They're turning into the Golden State Warriors of baseball.
Exactly. And, I mean, they did do it. There's no right way in Major League Baseball, but with Houston going through the draft, and they were smart with a lot of the free agency signings, getting guys. They got Michael Brantley, who turned into a stud for them in the ALCS.
Oh, I mean, listen, Mike, I think that I'm gonna, if you want to talk about the best offseason signings of the 2019 season, it was definitely not Machado, definitely not Harper, definitely not Kimbrel or Keuchel. It's a 1A and 1B of LeMahieu to the Yankees and Brantley to the Astros, and right under them at second or third technically is Charlie Morton to the Rays. What do those 3 things have in common? 3 players who are not super young, who were signed to short-term, low-budget deals, who completely changed the faces of their teams this season.
You didn't talk about Josh Donaldson at all, but I mean,
okay, yeah,
I get it too.
I would throw Donaldson up there too, except that I only counted him out because his deal, he made over $20 million. Yeah. LeMahieu's contract I think is 2 years, $24 million. Morton's was 2 years, $30 million, And I don't know what Michael Brantley's contract is, but I don't think it was all that expensive.
Oh no.
But those 3 players completely reshaped the teams that they're playing for. So, and of course, with Houston, so much almost the entire core of that team, at least on the offensive side, is homegrown, or from international signing.
You can make the argument that I think them and the Dodgers are the 2 most well-run organizations in the sport. Not even close right now. I mean, I think they've sustained this success now. For the Astros are a little shorter, just a couple years. The Dodgers have been, 7 straight division titles. No one's matched those 2, but Houston especially. I think they're in the middle of this run where they're smart. I mean, they just have a fantastic general manager and front office. They have a good on-field manager. There's just smart people within that organization. They get it. And there's not many teams in sports that I think really get it. I think obviously I'm going to say the Patriots. I think the Spurs just get it. And I think Houston and the Dodgers in baseball are the 2 organizations right now that they have a thing going. And I can't pick against that. Like Houston just 3 years in a row, they've won over 100 games. They made a World Series, won a World Series. Even in their down year, they lost in the ALCS. They're back in the World Series again. Like they just know what they're doing. They have a very, very well-run organization, and I just can't pick against that. I can't see them losing this. I think they're in a groove right now. They're going to be in a groove for years to come. They just have so much talent, and they're so well-run that it's hard to see them losing this series.
Nah, I'd agree with you on the Houston front. For LA, it's different because there's just so much money with the Dodgers that, I mean, Houston, of course, that's another big market, and they've got plenty of international signing pool money.
And they've got plenty of money.
They've got plenty of money just overall they can throw at free agents, but they're a lot smarter with the free agents that they sign. With the Dodgers, they're able to just stockpile free agents, international players. They're able to stockpile just prospects and pay every one of them plenty of money to sit in double AAA, and if even only 1 in 10 pans out for them, not even that, if 1 in 50 of their prospects pans out and becomes an average baseball player, that's fine by them because they have such a big organization and so much money they can throw at these free agents. And that's how they built it. With the Astros, though, they've just been such a smarter team than pretty much anyone else in baseball. They're, as far as front office general manager, they are the class of MLB right now. And again, there's not a whole lot of debate about that.
I think Houston is definitely number 1. And just to go off of the last thing here about these smart free agent signings, it's not just Houston. I think for the last 2 or 3 years, I would also say, again, Tampa Bay with not just free agency, but just making the right moves of any kind, whether they are international signees, trades, or free agency. Tampa Bay signed Charlie Morton. You trade Chris Archer. You trade for Tommy Pham. They've pushed all the right buttons. The Twins, they pushed a lot of the right buttons. They acquired Jake Odorizzi. They signed C.J. Cron, Nelson Cruz. They got Jonathan Scope. They added another level of power to the best power hitting lineup in baseball. Even the Yankees, in the last couple of years. My favorite example, of course, you have the LeMahieu signing is the most recent one everyone's going to talk about. The Stanton trade's obviously kind of at the other end of that. That really hasn't worked out. But Brian Cashman, I think his single best move of this entire decade of the 2010s was everything that they did with the Cubs. Cashman traded for Aroldis Chapman from the Reds for pennies before 2016. When he started suspension, he came back, and he was unhittable. He traded Aroldis Chapman to the Cubs for a package that included Gleyber Torres, and the next offseason, he signed Chapman back.
And should get arrested for that.
Honestly.
That's the best trade. That's going to go down as that's one of the best heists in MLB history.
Not to mention that
even a heist. It's not a heist because the Cubs got worth it too, but just how they maneuver that to trade Chapman, get someone like Torres, and then get Chapman back when your season was already over. Like, that is the dream day scenario, and they made it work.
Oh, absolutely. And to be honest, as well as it's worked out for the Yankees, the Cubs have so far gotten the better end of the deal because the Cubs have won a World Series. They got a World Series in 2016 with Chapman, and so far, with everything that the Yankees have done with the Cubs, it hasn't worked out yet. But yeah, I think to kind of wrap up here with the Houston Astros, I think that in terms of where the team is and where it's going to be, this is the best season that they're going to have in this dynasty.
The Astros?
Absolutely. Could they win 100 games in 2020? 100%. But will the 2020 team be as good as this one? I don't think so, and here's why. Garrett Cole will probably be gone. I just think that he's on pace with the season he's had, with the 2 years he's had in Houston, completely reviving his career. I mean, he's on track to become the highest paid starting pitcher of all time. And Houston doesn't have that kind of money readily available to give him. Justin Verlander is going to be 37 years old, and I know he's continued to defy the odds by remaining an unstoppable force. But if these playoffs are telling you anything, maybe it's that Verlander has gotten to a point where he can't throw 250 innings in a season anymore, and he may start to regress.
Well, but again, temper that expectation a little bit, though. Regressing for Justin Verlander is still going to be a well above average starter.
And I'm not trying to say that the Houston Astros are going to be a bad team in 2020. They will win the AL West with a hand tied behind their back in 2020. But just from where things look now, I don't think they will be the best team in the American League in 2020. I don't know who will be. I would love for it to be the Yankees, but I'm not going to go out and say that. I just don't think it's going to.
Yes, you are.
Yes, I am. If the Yankees spend money in the right places in the offseason, then they will be. But I just think that this is Houston's year.
Oh yeah.
Just like last year was Boston's year. Mm-hmm. This is Houston's year. They better win this World Series because this is the best team that I think they're going to be able to put together.
And even if Washington, let's say they do lose in 6, that's a great year for Washington. I mean, with Bryce Harper leaving, who knows what the season is going to be like. And you're right there with them in the mix. You make the World Series. It's not a disappointing season for Washington if they lose this World Series. I think it's disappointing for Houston if they were to lose this World Series.
And no,
so I think that the team with more urgency and just more on the line. I can't get over that fact.
Absolutely, and I definitely. It won't be disappointing I don't think it'll be disappointing for the Nats if they lose this World Series, because I see the 19 Nats the same way that a lot of people saw the 2017 Yankees. It was probably the only time in the last 20 years where the Yankees were actually the underdogs. They were the wild card team that year. They played way better than they were supposed to in 17, and they were a likable group of guys that if they had made the World Series, people actually would have been surprised and maybe, just maybe, rooted for them a little bit. Just maybe.
Yeah, don't push your luck there, but yeah.
I'm a saying. That's why I'm a saying just maybe. But for the Nationals, I think despite the fact that they are the underdogs and they probably can come back here again next year with so much of this team coming back, they want to win it too. I think they will be. I think considering how much adversity they've had to overcome to get here, that they will be disappointed if they lose.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely rooting for history and the Nationals to win it. The only problem I have with that, though, is how just unsufferable Washington fans are going to be.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, between the Caps 2 years ago and if the Nationals pull off this win, I don't think I'm going to be able to talk to anybody from the D.C. greater area for another year.
Fortunately,
it's a lot better when they're miserable.
Fortunately, we won't have any celebrating Nationals fans regularly appearing on this podcast. We're just going to have our resident Philly fan.
Which is almost worth just to hear Ben. Whenever Ben comes back, and if the Nationals do win the series, he's just going to be a mess to try to deal with while he's trying to figure out how the Phillies are going to beat the Nats next year.
He's also still going to be contemplating how Dustin May and Clayton Kershaw look alike. This has been
said that?
This has been Ben's most ridiculous hot take of the semester so far. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard it here first.
One of them is a ginger with the hair, 10 inches up to his head. How do they look alike?
I mean, beyond just hairstyle and hair color,
they don't look alike.
They look nothing alike.
They're 13 years apart too.
Are they actually?
Is it May 21 or?
Yeah, like May's
something like that.
May's young, Kershaw's old, something like that.
10 years apart.
I thought, it's something
they
like
don't
10.
Look alike. What is he talking about?
Nothing at all.
Listen. I don't want this episode.
It's like saying you look like Giancarlo Stanton. You guys don't look alike.
I see it a little bit,
dude. If
Actually,
I could
see that a little bit,
dude. If I could be 6'6" and ripped, I would be. And making $300 million.
Yeah, like Multi wouldn't be here if he was 6'6".
I would.
Before we end the show, why didn't he try to play the other games? Is he that hurt?
To be honest, I really don't. I don't know. And this will be my close. This is my closing thought here for our episode today. Some of Aaron Boone's decisions in this series were beyond questionable. Of course, I said pulling Paxton in Game 2. bringing in Ottavino later on in that game, in Game 2. But I think the biggest one, and the one that I firmly believe is the reason the Yankees lost this series, the biggest single reason, obviously there were a whole bunch of factors, but the one that takes up the largest percentage of the reason they lost was Edwin Encarnacion batting 4th or 5th in every game he started. Get this, too. In every game that Giancarlo Stanton played in this postseason, the Yankees won. All 5 games he played in, they won. All 4 games he didn't play in, they lost. Now, I'm sure that that's not a direct correlation, but Edwin Encarnacion, after the division series, he stopped hitting. And even if Stanton was only going to, piece together a couple of singles here and there, if he was hurt badly enough that he really couldn't have played, he should have been taken off the playoff roster. And he wouldn't have been available for the World Series, but if the Yankees were going to find a way to beat Houston, they may not have even needed him to play in the World Series, and they could have brought back, a Luke Voigt or Tyler Wade or anybody. So I think that maybe Stanton was really hurt as badly as he was, and that's one thing. But the fact that Edwin Encarnacion was batting in the middle of the lineup, striking out almost every time, if you're going to strike out against 3 or 4 times against Cole or Verlander, that's one thing. But if you're going to strike out against Zach Greinke and Joe Smith and these other guys who throw 88-mile-an-hour fastballs, it's pathetic. It really is.
Yeah, Encarnacion, to your point, he struck out almost every time. He had 18 at-bats. He had 4 walks, so 22 plate appearances. But he struck out 11 times.
Listen, he
Insane.
DH. What the
56?
Yep.
Sheesh, that's hard to do.
Here's the
Couldn't
crazy.
even slug his weight.
I'm not surprised. Here's the craziest part. Designated hitters in that championship series, I think, had 2 hits. Did Encarnacion have 1 hit?
Encarnacion had.
He was 1 for
hit.
18?
1 for 18.
And Alvarez was 1 for 21 or 1 for 22.
Yeah.
So designated
2 for 40.
Designated hitters were 2 for 40. That's so anti-American League. That just blows my mind.
I forgot we get to see the hitters pitch in the World Series. I always like to see that. Zach Greinke's a good hitter.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I know that's
Greinke's a good hitter.
That's gonna be really fun. For the Astros, I think that their only offensive-related concern for this World Series is gonna be where to put Yordan Alvarez. I don't care that he had a horrible championship series. He's got to play.
Yeah, so what do you do in the games in Washington with him?
Well, and that's the thing. So naturally you put your worst defensive outfielder in left field, but are you really going to make Michael Brantley play right field or center field?
Who sits in that case? Oh, Reddick and Marissa.
Or
Kyle Tucker will sit.
All 3 of those guys will probably sit.
Then,
I think the Astros
Sure.
The Astros are going to have to bite the bullet on Alvarez. I don't think he played any time in the outfield this season, but
wow.
The options are either you bench him or you take the risk and you play him.
Maybe they'll get a Trent Grisham play on them and help them win a game.
Honestly, for the Nationals, I think it's going to take a lot of skill and a little bit of luck to get this World Series done. So hopefully that happens.
Yeah, but if Maltzy got his closing little thought, I'll take one here.
Oh
too.
yeah,
We'll throw it to Matt to close out the show. But just the only thing I've got to say, we didn't touch on too much, but the Cardinals Nationals LCS, that if there's one takeaway that I have from that, being a Cardinals fan, is just never have hope. You shouldn't be hopeful about anything. That was the only thing, because the Cardinals were dead in the water after 2 games. I mean, you get almost no hit by Anibal Sanchez, who, again, becomes an animal in the postseason. And you've got to face Scherzer, Strasburg, and Corbin in that order. I mean, that's tough. That is absolutely just insane to try to do for any team, let alone the Cardinals, who, again, couldn't even bat their weight in that postseason, or in that series, rather. But, I mean, it got down to the 8th inning. They had 2 outs, bases loaded, down by 3. And granted, the series was still 0-3. I mean, even if the Cardinals did pull off that game, we still had another one in Washington before the series would go back to St. Louis, and who knows if we could even hit in any of those ballparks. But just to have the hope that the Cardinals had some shot at pulling off one game, the gentleman's sweep as they call it, pulling off the one game in Game 4 win, that just hurt. That made the entire series sting a little bit more. And now, coming next season, who knows if Marcell Ozuna's still going to be on the roster, if Adam Wainwright's going to not retire and stay with the Cardinals. there could be a lot of changes there for St. Louis, and I came into the season saying that this was the year they had to do something. And we got Goldschmidt, locked him up for a while. Tommy Edman burst on the scene. He's going to be a great player for years to come, it looks like. But, there's still a lot of big question marks for Cardinals next year and especially years after that. And then the Yankee series, too. I mean, you had LeMahieu with that home run. I mean, that one was just a lazy fly ball if it's hitting Washington. But, I mean, if LeMahieu hits that homer, you got that game tied in the top of the ninth. You're feeling cloud nine, then 10 minutes later, it's over. It's just tough.
Oh, yeah.
Baseball's a horrible sport.
Dang.
I honestly was really rooting for the Yankees to be in this World Series. I just like the brand. Like as a fan, when my team's not in it, New York being in the World Series just means more to me than Houston. Even though Houston's the better team, just that Yankees. I was really looking forward to Washington, New York. Yankee Stadium. Get some more late October, early November games at the stadium. It's just better when the Yankees are relevant, and especially when they make it to the World Series. Even though they didn't deserve to win that series, as a Red Sox fan, I'm okay to admit I was pulling for the Yankees to make the World Series.
Ooh.
Sorry if that makes me. We already won a World Series. I don't care about the counting the World Series anymore. If the Red Sox hadn't won and they're still in the curse, then F the Yankees. But we won last year. New York can have their titles. I don't care. I wanted them to make the World Series. And then I would have reevaluated the situation if I would want to win the World Series and listen to the Bronx Bomber fans, like the one across the table here, for the next year. But I did. I'm not afraid to admit it.
I respect that. I think
Thank you,
to a degree, it is good for baseball for the Yankees to be in the World Series, just because New York is one of, if not the biggest baseball market in the country. It's right up there with Boston and Houston and LA. It's right up there with them.
Don't forget about St. Louis. It's a great market.
And St. Louis, and St. Louis.
I'm gonna say we got best fans in baseball in St. Louis.
They have a good fan base.
They do have a good.
I have no issue with St. Louis.
They do. I was in St. Louis back in 2013 when the World Series was going down, and the city was quite lively. It was a good time.
Great sports town. No, I'm shocked to hear you say that though, Matt.
Really?
I mean, even when the Cubs were just god awful, there was no way I was gonna root for them. I mean, when they were at halfway decent in 08 and then in the World Series in 2016, there was absolutely no way I wanted them to win.
I probably would be pulling for the Nationals in the World Series, but it's just more enjoyable when the Yankees are in it. And it was the ALC. Imagine if it was like Minnesota, Houston in that ALCS. You wouldn't enjoy that, right?
I like Minnesota.
I mean, listen,
I just enjoy watching the Bomba Squad, seeing those fans come out.
The novelty of it being Houston, Minnesota would have been great, but it wouldn't have been the two best teams facing off against each other.
Oh, certainly not.
That ALCS was the two championship series. Here's the difference: the National League was the two hottest teams. The AL was the two best teams, and one of those best teams against one of those hottest teams is the World Series matchup that we've got. Game 1 starts tomorrow night at I think 7 o'clock starting time from Houston.
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock starting time from Houston.
Well,
7 Central.
7 Central.
I was gonna say 7 o'clock in Houston, 8 o'clock East Coast.
7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern here in Boston. You've got Cole Scherzer. It's going to be a phenomenal game. It's hopefully going to be a phenomenal series. I know we can't wait to see how this unfolds and see if the underdog Nationals are going to go all the way or if the juggernaut Astros are going to put their foot down and bring home their second title in 3 years. That's going to wrap it up here for Episode 5 of Season 2 of Fair or Foul here on WTBU Sports. For our esteemed guests, Matt Doherty and Jacob Littner, I'm Daniel Maltz, and we'll see you again for Episode 6, where we're going to be recapping the World Series and maybe diving into some awards and some off-season as we begin to turn the page and look forward to 2020. Until then, we'll see you soon.